Welcome to week 3 of Mpai 600 here at Georgetown University School of Applied Intelligence. I think we're getting rolling with the course. That's always a good thing. I think you've gotten any feedback for the discussion sections I provided. All the current events were fine, and as I mentioned in the first week, I'm just looking that you read the news and can summarize the news that's relevant to this course. I'm not, those are easy 100 points or easy grade, and I just want to make sure that that's clear. I don't want people to get wrapped around that. I do want people to get concerned about the discussion sections. As you saw in my comments, most of you did fine. Those who needed improvement, I noted on that what you need to improve. But most importantly, show me in the discussion section that you've done the reading, that you've done the work, and that you've taken the lessons and applied it to whatever case study that we're discussing for that week. That's what I'm looking for these discussion posts, and they're also good building blocks as you go into the papers and the exams. So as I'm reading this now, as I'm saying this, the collection strategy is probably due now, tomorrow, yesterday, depending on when you're watching this on Sunday night. And as I mentioned, it's going to be the purpose is to have an intelligence angle to whatever problem that you're looking at. That's what I want you to explore in this collection cycle, or the collection plan. What I also want you to be cognizant of is many people get hundreds on the current events, on the discussion sections. Rarely do I give grades that high for the assignments. The assignments are more formal, while the discussion sections are a little bit more freewheeling, so you can be, I tend to grade those a little bit easier. So just bear that in mind going forward. So so this is week 3, review of week 2. Again, we went over requirements, what they were, and how to integrate them into the collection plan. And that's what I'm hoping you're doing as I'm taping this right now. And then the second part, we discussed intelligence traps. Or analytical mindset failures. And these occur in the intelligence field. They occur in other fields too, where there is, you have to piece together an answer based on incomplete clues and information. So whether that's intelligence, whether that's law enforcement, whether that's medicine, these kind of analytical biases occur. And again, the key ones, confirmation bias and mirror imaging. Confirmation bias is when you're trying to confirm your first assumption, whether it's right or wrong, and all evidence that comes in is used or skewed to confirm that first assumption. And second, mirror imaging, that is when you are reflecting your own viewpoints and your own background into what an adversary might be thinking. You could see that in some ways in how we deal with North Korea, how we deal with Russia, how we deal with China. We assume rationality being American rationality, when in fact rationality on the other side, it might be a completely different viewpoints. So those are kind of intelligence traps we fall in. And the case study kind of illustrated this in the confessions. And just some key ones to bring about. This is classic confirmation bias. You all saw that in the video. The first evidence, the detective, it was the original detective, made one call, and all the evidence was framed to fit that one mold, to a ridiculous level. And I think you got that impression, or I hope you got that impression from the documentary. Again, evidence was fit to fit a narrative that was just not there. Vividness bias. Some of you alluded to this in the discussion section. Where it really came into play was the playing of the confessions in front of the jury. Detective Ford understood that a confession played well in front of a jury or a judge or an appellate court. That would be a lot more important than scientific data, which was not as vivid. Of course, that was what sealed the fate of these 4 sailors. In jury trials, we have this vividness bias occurs when someone will put out a crime scene of a murder, someone horribly murdered and blood and everything like that. A prosecutor will do that to convict a suspect. But just because there's a murder and just because it was grisly doesn't mean that that connects to that the suspect did it. But prosecutors know that if the more grisly a crime, the more blood I can show on there, the more I can pick people's emotions, the more likely they are to convict, even though that doesn't mean that the suspect committed the crime. So vividness bias was very clear here. It's also probably clear in your day-to-day jobs as well. Clientelism. This is when you're there to please a client at all costs. And again, some of these factors just compound each other, but in this case, there was pressure to solve this heinous crime. Pressure from the prosecutors, pressure from the community. They didn't want a rampant killer out there to go unsolved. And this forced, again, the detectives to falsify evidence, in this case, to please their client, which was, again, the prosecutors and essentially the community as a whole. This, again, forced a bad outcome. And then moving along, Georgetown values. I don't know if people in this class are Catholic or Jesuit or religious or they really care about that stuff. One thing at Georgetown we are trying to import is some sort of ethics, whether that's, again, based on religion, whether that's based on legality, whether it's just based on humanistic principles. And this is one of the case studies that highlighted. This was a grave misjustice done. This justice was only rectified a year ago. So this incident occurred in 1998. Only at the end of 2018 was compensation given by the municipality to these 4 victims. So in 2009, they were released, as you saw. In 2013, their crimes were vacated, which means they were taken off the pedophile list, or the list that highlights people as being potential sexual deviants. They were only taken off that list in 2013, and they were only given compensation 2018. This was a miscarriage of justice. This was a horrible miscarriage that many of you blame Detective Ford, but I'll remind you that it was prosecutors, it was judges, it was appellate courts, it was juries, it was the governor's office. All had a hand in this misjustice, or this miscarriage of justice. So, when we try and impart values on you in this course, in this program, this is one of those case studies I'd like to think you would take to heart. And then finally, I've talked about bias in this segment, and that was the point of the discussion section, but I really question whether a student about a year ago mentioned this isn't bias. Good people have biases. Evil people do what happened in this case study. Detective Ford was an evil person, and that's what happened in this case. And good people have biases. Hopefully you recognize them, but this was a case of evil. I don't know. I'll let you decide, but before I let you decide, I think, again, my personal feelings, we could all be Detective Fords. Given the pressures and given our own biases, we could be proponents of this miscarriage of justice. At the very least, we could be on juries or judges or prosecutors that suffer from these biases and are not necessarily evil people. I don't know. I'll let you decide on that, but whether this is just people who had biases or this was just a criminal or evil person in the system. So moving on to week 3, we get into our historical case studies for this week. So 2 case studies: strategic surprise, Pearl Harbor, and the Yom Kippur War. 2 historical aspects that impact our intelligence community in the United States and in other countries as well. So as you're going through the readings, as you're going through the documentaries, pardon me, ask what were the failures, or where did the failures occur? What part of the intelligence cycle failed? Was it in collection? Was it in analysis? Was it when they're trying to convey this information to policymakers and decision makers that could have mitigated the risk in both of these cases? Or was it in policymakers who received the information but didn't act? Or, as I like to say, there were underlying circumstances, just stuff happens, just bad luck that contributed to these two intelligence failures. Most people are probably familiar with Pearl Harbor. Many of you might not be familiar with Yom Kippur War. You'll see it in the documentaries, but this was Israel's largest intelligence failure, dealing with the invasion of Israeli territory by the Egyptians in Syria and the Syrians. And the Egyptians did not know that in 1973 these two countries were going to invade until 4 hours before it happened. And the question is why? Why did it fail despite the sophisticated intelligence of Israel? Why did this failure occur? So the readings and documentaries, The Doll is probably the best analysis of Pearl Harbor that I've seen. So I assigned the chapters in there. The Yom Kippur War, The Riddell, I've assigned an article on there that covers the failure really well. And then the Al Jazeera, The Crossing, which is actually a first part of a 3-part documentary on the Yom Kippur War. Really, the first 20-25 minutes of that documentary cover the intelligence failure. So you can watch you can watch all 3 episodes if you want, but really the first 30 minutes of the first episode are the key points. So with that being said, look forward to reading your collection strategies. I should have those to you by next week. And if there's questions or issues, please let me know.